Good evening, everybody, and welcome into another session of Night with a Museum. I'm Chris. I'm the Adult Programs Coordinator for the Schaumburg Township District Library. I'm so happy to have so many of you with us today. I know I have a lot of Schaumburg patrons in the room, but I also know I have some friends not from Schaumburg in the Zoom. So welcome to everybody from our partner libraries who are joining us this evening to celebrate the Olympics this year with the Lake Placid Olympic Museum. Before I go over all my normal Zoom favors and friendly reminders, thank you so much to everybody who has answered this poll. I'm going to actually pull this one down. We have a second poll I'm going to throw up for you. This one's very important. I need everybody to just very quickly tell me what their home library is. So whoever you normally go to check out your books, be it Schaumburg or any of the, I think St. Charles is partnered on this, whichever other libraries you're from. That way I can report back to your home libraries and let them know how many of you joined us this evening so that they can share with their teams the success of this program. So if you could do that for me, that'd be great. I know they'd love to hear how many of you joined us tonight. And while you're doing that, I'll go over my normal friendly Zoom reminders. So we have the Q&A active. So if you have any questions for this evening's speaker, please throw those in there. We'll handle all questions at the end of the presentation, but don't hesitate to throw those in as we go. That way you don't forget them by the time we get to the end. You can also use the Q&A to reach out to me if you're experiencing any technical difficulties during the program. That Q&A will be the best way for me to go back and forth with you to assist you in any way I need. If you're noticing that Zoom is being difficult, acting up, you're not hearing very well, you're not seeing very well, we are also live streaming this on the Schaumburg Library YouTube page, so you can always pop over there too. That's kind of my Band-Aid fix for any problems that might be going on. And then we've also enabled closed captions for your convenience, and you can turn those on or off as you wish using your Zoom toolbar. Now, I'm going to very quickly introduce our speaker this evening, and then I'm going to pass the evening over to her. So Bridie Ryan works at the Lake Placid Olympic Museum on their education programming and outreach. Her favorite winter sport to do is backcountry skiing, and her favorite winter sport to watch at the Olympics is ice dancing. Everybody, please a warm virtual welcome to Bridie.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bridie, and so tonight I'm going to be sharing with you the story of the Olympic Games. As we mentioned, I'm the educator here at the Lake Placid Olympic Museum, which is located in upstate New York. And actually, as we go on through the presentation, I will pause at a couple of points just to check in if we have any questions going on. But we will do like a bigger Q&A at the end as well. But if anyone has any like urgent things that need to get caught as we go, I hope to catch them. But yeah. So here's a little visual of where I am currently. So this is New York State. Lake Placid is right up here, very far north. So this is a visual, but this map isn't super pretty. So here's a much nicer visual of what it looks like here in Lake Placid this time of year. It's really pretty great. Who are we? This museum was founded in 1980, right after Lake Placid hosted the Winter Olympics for a second time. And it begins as the Olympic and Winter Sports Museum. In 1994, we partner with the Olympic Regional Development Authority, which is a state organization that manages all the former Olympic sites in the area. And we're still our own nonprofit organization, though we are now located inside what's called the Olympic Center. In 2011, we are renamed the Lake Placid Olympic Museum. That's what we are now. And in 2022, we have a huge renovation and we reopened with 7 new exhibitions. And this year, actually just 2 weeks ago, we opened a new exhibit about climate change and winter sports. And we're super excited about the current Winter Olympics going on in Italy. I know I was watching a lot of the women's short program earlier. But anyway, so I just said, the Olympics are happening right now in Italy, but we're going to be thinking a little bit about where and when they start. So we're going to go all the way back to the beginning. This map depicts ancient Greece in the classical era from about 480 to 323 BCE. The Olympics actually last for about 12 centuries, from 776 BCE until 393 AD. And the territory of ancient Greece was changing just a little bit throughout this tradition, but broadly, this was what this is what encompassed ancient Greece. And we're just going to pause really quick and look at the map. I'm not expecting you to actually be able to read any of these dots because there is a lot going on. Ancient Greece is pretty big. Each little dot represents a different city-states, and it was hugely diverse, full of peoples from what are today many different nations and cultures. And we have this little dot right here in here. This is Olympia, where the ancient Olympics, hence the name, took place every 4 years, just like they do today. At times, the Greeks waged bloody wars against one another, but every 4 years, they called truces and they found common ground right here in Olympia, Greece. By today's standards, we wouldn't consider the ancient Olympics particularly democratic. Only citizens were allowed to compete, and Greek citizens had to fulfill two requirements. They had to be men, and they had to have been born free in Greece. This meant that no women, no foreigners, and no slaves could partake. However, it was pretty unique in that it was open to citizens across social classes. Spectators watched, and citizens competed in what was at the time an unusually democratic event. This idea of the Olympics being open to quote unquote anyone, it remained constant through the 12 centuries that they were active in ancient Greece, and it was a founding tenet of the modern Olympics that we see today. However, as we're going to kind of discuss throughout this program, the idea of who is included in this idea of anyone is very deeply rooted in the culture and the context that it comes from. Also, by the way, a fun fact in ancient Greece, all athletes competed naked. There were no uniforms. And then I'm just gonna just see if anyone already threw in any questions in the chat, um, in case there was any confusion off the bat, but it's looking like we are good to keep going. So to quickly recap, the Olympics, they first begin nearly 3,000 years ago in Olympia, Greece. They continue as a celebrated festival happening every 4 years for about 1,200 years. Then in 393 AD, Emperor Theodosius I officially ends the Olympics. There are a lot of things going on in the 4th century that contributed to their downfall. Most especially like Roman conquest and the rise of Christianity, because the opening ceremony was essentially just a big sacrifice to Zeus. So it gets outlawed as a pagan festival. So they end in 393 AD. But that was a long time ago. The Olympics are happening right now. Thinking about how that happened. In 1896 AD, 1,500 years after the ancient games end, Pierre de Coubertin revives the concept of the Olympics, believing that the world can become a better place through what he refers to as gentleman's sport. So this is Pierre de Coubertin right here. The modern Olympics, they come out of the Greek revival movement. This is a cultural movement of the mid-1800s, driven in part by archaeological excavations taking place in Greece that are really engaging a lot of public attention. People are super interested in ancient Greece, including our man Pierre de Coubertin over here with his really excellent mustache. He is fascinated by ancient Greece. But he's also an educator, and he believes really strongly in the right of every child to take part in physical education. And he actually pioneers the inclusion of phys ed in French curriculum. And you might be thinking, what does ancient Greece have to do with being forced to run the mile every year? Like, what does that have to do with gym class? But Pierre is not thinking about that. He's thinking these two things, these two interests of mine, they go together perfectly because I think those ancient Olympics were pretty cool. What if we brought them back? So that's exactly what he does. The first modern Olympic Games, they take place in Athens, Greece in 1896, around 1,500 years after they end in ancient Greece. So they modern games, they start in Athens, but a long time ago in ancient Greece, they were always in Olympia. But anyway, Pierre de Coubertin, he sets the precedent that the Olympics are about peace, understanding, and cultural exchange, not just athletic excellence. So remember, the Olympics in ancient Greece, they revolved around setting aside differences between city-states every 4 years and calling truces to enjoy the Olympics. Pierre wants the modern Olympic Games to be about friendly competition, absolutely, but he does also really strongly believe that bringing people together like this will help nations to overcome their differences. Like the ancient Greeks, maybe we can also use the Olympics to broker peace. And this is part of why he creates this sketch of the Olympic Games, shown right over here. And I'm just going to share a little bit about what this design means. He uses these five different colors plus the white background so that every nation can have at least one color from their flag represented. He also chooses five interlocking rings to represent what he referred to as the five parts of the world now won over to Olympism. And they represent the five inhabited continents, which at the time were considered Oceania, Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. So the Americas, it wasn't North and South America. They were glommed into one. So here we see our friend Pierre again. He's a little older, a little wiser. He's still rocking the stash though. But like most people, Pierre is full of contradictions. And this is one of his quotes about the ideal Olympics. He says, "The games are global. All people must be allowed in without debate." He designed those rings so that every nationality would feel included in the Olympic movement. And he sincerely believes that coming together for athletic competition will unite the world in friendship and peace. But to look a little bit deeper into what Pierre's Olympics actually look like, the Olympics are meant to be gentlemen's sport. And this means two important things. One of them is that all athletes have to be amateurs, no professionals are allowed. And he's also very, very against women taking part in the Olympic Games. This, in my opinion, is pretty interesting. Like I said, like he's a person. We're all full of contradictions. But he's like no women allowed, but he also literally did just say all people must be allowed in. Um, and his reasoning for this is that he strongly believes in protecting the dignity of women. He didn't think that anyone would be at all interested in watching women play sports. He thought the only people watching would be like creeps who were into women and not normal people who wanted to watch athletics. And he holds on to this opinion for decades. And even throughout the early 1900s, it is a pretty unpopular one. But I think it is interesting. He sincerely thinks that preventing women from competing is protecting them because he just cannot fathom a world in which people enjoy watching women's sports to appreciate their athletic achievements. And I bring this up because it's still something we're honestly talking about in 2026. I don't know if anyone's heard like nobody watches women's sports and kind of the pushback movement of if you see people wearing hats or t-shirts that says everybody watches women's sports. And actually, the first time that we had an even number of men and women competing at the Olympics was just 2 years ago in 2024 at the Paris Olympic Summer Games. So it was the first time 50% of the athletes were women. And the Winter Olympics that is going on right now, they are the most gender balanced they've ever been, but we're still at under 50% for female athletes for Winter Olympics. So it's never happened yet. All right, I will just check in and see if we had anything going on in the Q&A. All right, we are looking good. All right, so to quickly recap, the modern Olympics, they've officially begun. One of the major rules is that we still have no professionals allowed. And here we have two pictures. They're from the 1920 Antwerp Olympic Games. And we have both ice hockey going on over here and tennis. And these are at the same Olympics, both 1920 Antwerp Games. But people start thinking, hey, we have some sports happening here that have to be in the winter, and we have some sports that are happening over here that are mostly in the summer. We should probably do something about that. So they have the bright idea. With the addition of figure skating and hockey at recent Olympics, they think we should split the games by season. So in 1924, the games are officially split by season and they take place in Chamonix, France. And here we see some ski jumping taking place at those Olympics. The 1924 Olympic Winter Games in Chamonix, France are initially known as International Winter Sports Week, but retroactively we recognize them as the first ever Winter Olympics. At the 1924 Chamonix Olympics, Charles Dutroux, this guy right here, he's a speed skater and he is from Lake Placid, where I am right now. He is in the first competition, and he gets to go down in history as the first place winner of the Winter Olympics. And as I said, he's from Lake Placid. And Lake Placid, since the first Winter Games in 1924, has sent at least one athlete to every subsequent Winter Games, which is a pretty incredible Olympic legacy, particularly considering we are a village of 2,000 year-round residents, which is pretty small. But we do have a handful of local athletes competing in Cortina right now, which is super exciting. All right. So the Winter Olympics, they've begun. It's 1924, and we are starting to look for different places that can host the Winter Games. So you want to think about, what does a place need if they want to host the Winter Olympics? We might want some cold weather, some snow, some infrastructure. Lake Placid is pretty chilly. We have a lot of snow, and we have some mountains. Um, so it's looking pretty good. But I'll also say, in the wintertime, it is very dark up here. You really have to come up with, it's also very cold. And you have to come up with ways to entertain yourself, get fresh air, meet up with friends. Otherwise, winter is just like the worst time ever. But as I mentioned, Lake Placid has sent at least one athlete to every Olympic Winter Games since they began in 1924. So we do have a pretty thriving winter sports culture up here. And I'm not an Olympian, but I do love I love playing outside. And the winter sports community in this area is a really fun community to be a part of. But back to the 1920s, we have our first Winter Olympics in 1924 in France. And then in 1928, the Winter Olympics for the next year, they get awarded to St. Moritz, Switzerland. And somebody else from Lake Placid, not just an athlete, is going to St. Moritz in 1928. Godfrey Dewey goes to Switzerland in 1928. I also do have to mention this because I am talking to a library right now. If his last name sounds a little familiar, that is because his dad is Melville Dewey, who is also the inventor of the Dewey Decimal System. And both Melville Dewey and Godfrey Dewey are pretty heavily involved in the Lake Placid Athletic Club. And so throughout the 1920s, Godfrey Dewey is doing all these things with the Lake Placid Athletic Club. They're organizing skiing and skating for members in the wintertime. And he decides to attend the Winter Olympics in 1928 and just take tons and tons of notes because, in his opinion, he thinks that Lake Placid ought to be the next Winter Olympic host city. The Winter Olympics have never come to North America before, but he's got a dream. He's doing a ton of research, and ultimately, he makes a great argument to the International Olympic Committee, and he's successful because the 1932 Olympic Winter Games are awarded to Lake Placid, New York. And this picture, so on the left, this is Godfrey Dewey. And then on the right here, this is Godfrey Dewey shaking hands with Comte de Bailly-Latour, who was president of the International Olympic Committee at that time. So Lake Placid's awarded the bid, and at the 1932 Olympics, we have some events that I think really realize Pierre de Coubertin's dream of the Olympics kind of being a spring of international cooperation. There is a little thing going on at this point in history. It's more of a big thing. Some might even call it great. In 1932, we have the Great Depression. And this kind of makes it harder to host the Olympics. Countries don't have a lot of extra cash lying around, so to send athletes to the games, especially not whole teams. So when it comes time for the 1932 hockey tournament, there's actually not enough teams to host a full-on tournament. So for one part of it, what they do is Team Canada and Team USA combine into one mega team. And then the Lake Placid Athletic Club team and the team from McGill University in Montreal, actually, fun fact, where hockey was invented, they also join in. And it's a real show of teamwork and international cooperation to just pull off something fun and joyful in the midst of the Great Depression, which was famously really depressing. And while the Winter Olympics undoubtedly leave their mark on Lake Placid, we here in Lake Placid, we also leave our marks on the Olympics. So on the left here, you see the classic podium medal ceremony. So if you've ever watched the games in person or on TV, you see the prize winners. They get their gold, silver, bronze medals, and they stand on a podium. And then right here, this is actually a podium that we have in the museum, not one from 1932, but one you can get up on. And incorporating a podium into the Olympics happens for the first time here in Lake Placid in 1932, and it's something we still see at the Winter and Summer Olympics today. So now, anytime you see the podium on TV at the Olympics, have some pride because that element of the Olympic tradition started right here in the States. Yeah, so the Olympic Games, they leave Lake Placid in 1932, and they head to Germany in 1936. So to quickly recap the rules on the Olympics, it is still only amateurs allowed. So you cannot be paid and compete to compete in your sport. We have winter games and summer games that are split. However, they're just happening a few months apart from each other. They're still going on in the same year. And then also, women are getting to join in more and more. There's the addition of women's events for alpine skiing in 1936, speed skating in 1952, hockey in 1998, ski jumping in 2014, and we're actually still adding events today. I'll take a super quick pause to see if you have questions. How come professional basketball players were in the Olympics? That is a great question. So the rule for amateurs and professionals does end up changing, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, but we're jumping ahead a few decades. Great question. And how were the early modern Olympics financed? Another good question. They weren't nearly as expensive as they are now, but towns did have to raise funds themselves. So Lake Placid actually, the townspeople of Lake Placid had to go to a vote in the midst of the Great Depression in 1932 about whether or not they were going to borrow the money required to build the infrastructure. And they very resoundingly voted yes, they wanted to borrow that money to do it. How many events were hosted at the first Lake Placid Olympics? Oh my gosh, you're quizzing me. Um, how many events did we have? We had 252 total athletes. Um, and I think it was pretty low. We didn't have a ton of different events. No, don't apologize. It's okay. I'm just totally forgetting. We had 252 athletes. Today at the Olympics in 2026, we have over 3,000. Yeah. Who won the first ice hockey medals? The first ice hockey medals, in I can answer this more at the end if this isn't the answer you were looking for. But in 1932, Team USA ended up taking home the gold for the tournament. All right. So I'm gonna keep going with our timeline. There are a lot of events and changes at the Olympics that are really reflections of what's going on in the world at the time. So over the next few decades, we have a whole lot of things coming up. The Olympics, they leave behind Lake Placid in 1932, and then they happen again in Berlin, Germany in 1936. So through the decades, the Olympic Winter Games have been lenses through which to view some of the failures, hopes, and greatest successes of humanity. And we are taking a look here at an artifact that we have here in the museum, and this is from the 1936 Berlin Olympic Summer Games. So if you think about what's going on contextually in Berlin in 1936, Hitler is in power, the Nazi Party is on the rise, and we are right on the eve of World War II. And this is actually the first Olympic torch right here. So I'll talk a little bit about what the Olympic torch relay is. And the Olympic torch every year, it's lit in Olympia, Greece on fire. And then torchbearers travel with it to wherever the Olympics are being hosted that year. And this is kind of a callback to a tradition from ancient Greece. So if you remember how the different city-states of ancient Greece would call a truce for the duration of the Olympics, part of that truce was running around, having someone run around, kind of like a relay, and say, "Hey, the Olympics are happening right now, so it would be pretty cool if we could put all of our warring and our murdering just on pause for a bit." And so that person running around announcing peace and truces is kind of the inspiration for like what the modern torch relay is originating from. And so in 1936, they kind of create a relay. The Nazis do decide they want to have someone running around Europe and announcing that the Olympics are about to happen, just like they used to do in ancient Greece, but they make a few changes. Instead of calling for peace, this is actually about spreading Nazi propaganda and recruiting to the Nazi cause. And then they just light the torch on fire just for fun. Flames have been getting used symbolically at the Olympics for a few years now, but this is the first time they're actually incorporated into a torch that's moving around. And this is a map of where the Olympic flame traveled in 1936. So like I said, it begins in Olympia, Greece, and then they take it all across Europe, and it ends up in Berlin, Germany. In 1936, Hitler is nervous about hosting the Olympics for very good reasons. He's super worried about the Nazi regime being criticized. And one of the things that actually convinces him to go ahead with hosting the Olympic Games is the work of his propaganda minister, who decides to co-opt a tradition from the ancient Olympics, which is the torch relay. Here's an image of the 1936 torch relay actually taking place. This is the torch right over here. And it really kicks off Hitler's plan for the Olympics to quote unquote prove that the Aryan race is superior in every way, especially in athletics. But famously, that plan goes pretty poorly, with Black American athlete Jesse Owens absolutely dominating in track and field. And this is him right here. Um, so I want to think back to 4 years ago in 1932, thinking about the international cooperation that really fulfilled our old pal Pierre's vision of what the Olympic Games can and should be. There's that U.S.-Canada hockey team who worked together to pull off the tournament in the midst of the Great Depression. And then what we have here is something that goes down in history in 1936 as Hitler's Olympics. And given what we know about Hitler, that's not a compliment. That's pretty bad. Pierre de Coubertin, for all of his visions about building a better world through sport, he is not naive. Pierre de Coubertin did recognize that sport could be used for good or for evil. He said, athletics can bring into play both the noblest and basest of passions. They can be used to strengthen peace or to prepare for war. Clearly, in 1936, the Olympics were disappointingly used to prepare for war. Due to World War II, after 1936, the Olympics don't happen for 12 years. But in 1948, we get to see something that I think is really beautiful. A lot of times people ask me what my favorite artifact is in the museum, and this poster is honestly it. Because in 1948, for the first time in more than a decade, the nations of the world gather for a reason that isn't violent. Switzerland is chosen as the location to host the games because Switzerland is famously neutral, and they already had all the infrastructure from when they hosted in 1928, so it was a great pick. And this poster was intentionally designed to communicate humanity's hopes to head into a bright future with our bright sun here and leave behind the darkness of the Holocaust and World War II and to do it together. We can choose to use the Olympics to strengthen peace. And that's what they do here. And they also we start to reclaim the torch relay. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about the torch relay because I think it's super fun. So I'll just kind of point out some other fun artifacts that kind of sort of showcase what's going on in the world through these little Olympic snapshots. So like I said, after World War II, the torch relay is reclaimed and it's returned to its original purpose of spreading peace. And today, the International Olympic Committee and the United Nations actually work together to get as many countries as possible to sign what's called the Olympic Truce every 4 years. And as the torch relay continues as an Olympic tradition, it starts to become customary for every host nation to design their own version of the torch. This one is from the 1956 Olympic Games that took place in Cortina, Italy. And I also particularly wanted to point out this torch because the Olympics are happening right now again in the same spot. And Cortina is joining Lake Placid this year as being part of the super cool club of two-time Winter Olympic host cities. In 1968, we get to see these really bright red, super fun coats that are part of the Team USA uniform. Up until this point, coats have been pretty basic and boring in terms of color. But there's a big reason why in 1968 the Olympic uniforms suddenly explode in bright colors. And that is because in 1968, the Olympic Winter Games in Grenoble, France, they mark the first time that the opening ceremony is televised in color. And related to that, as we start to see the Olympic Winter Games, they're televised more broadly and they're also being televised in color. We see a change in how people engage with Olympic sports. This picture right here, this is Peggy Fleming. She is a figure skater. She's a pretty good figure skater. In 1968, she's actually the only American to take home a gold medal. But now that the audiences can watch the Winter Olympics in color, this is when figure skating really explodes in popularity. It's a lot more fun to watch when you get to see all of the color that's involved with it, because it is absolutely super athletic, but it is also kind of an artistic event as well. This is the 1976 Innsbruck, the 1976 torch from Innsbruck, Austria. And coincidentally, Innsbruck is another two-time Winter Olympic host city. But I also point this one out because this marks the first time that a woman, Crystal Hawes, this is her right here, she is chosen to be part of the final leg of the relay to come in and light the cauldron during the opening ceremony. So we're in 1976 now. And I want to set the scene a little. The 13th edition of the Winter Olympic Games are coming up, and they are coming to a really cool place that's already hosted the Winter Olympics once before. In the late 1970s, Lake Placid is once again chosen to host the Olympic Winter Games. So we have to update all of our venues from the 30s, and as all of them are being updated, a rule is put into place that states that everything must have an intended reuse for after the games. So to this day, 100% of our Olympic venues are still in use. Here on the left with this picture here, we see workers installing a refrigeration system from the ice or for the ice rink. The arena built for the 1980 Olympics, we still host practices, tournaments, and competitions. They're actually on the ice practice. There's teams practicing on the ice right now as I'm speaking. Um, and then on the right, we also see workers here building the Olympic Village. So people have to think a little bit about what they want the Olympic Village to be turned into after the Olympic Games leave. And the Olympic Village actually becomes the Raybrook Federal Correctional Facility, and it is still an operational prison. So when the Olympics begin, a stunning array of history-making moments leave the Lake Placid Olympic Winter Games a year to remember. So I'm going to begin with Willie Davenport and Jeff Gadley. In 1980, they become the first Black Americans to compete in the Winter Olympics. Willie Davenport, who is pictured right here. He also has the unique distinction of being only the fourth American to become what's called a dual Olympian, or an Olympian who has competed in both summer and winter games. Before competing as a bobsledder for Team USA, Davenport was a successful track and field athlete, winning gold in 1968 and bronze in 1976. Willie Davenport and Jeff Gadley, they did face discrimination, but they did make important first steps in fulfilling Pierre de Coubertin's initial dream of the Olympic Games, which is that the games are global, and as you remember, all people must be allowed in without debate. Another piece of history, Eric Heiden, who's a speed skater, he wins 5 gold medals at the Lake Placid Olympics. He breaks both world and Olympic records with his performances. And those are two different things because at the time, still, in 1980, we don't have amateurs. So the world record includes professionals and the Olympic records are like the amateur records. But he breaks both the records and he comes in first in every distance from the 500 meter to the 10,000 meter. It is a feat of athleticism that has never happened before and has not happened since in the sport of speed skating. And because it is not 1980, it is 46 years later, I can give us a little epilogue for what happens to Eric Heiden after these games. He competes in the Tour de France. He's kind of becoming this well-known athlete. He has these offers for sponsorships and opportunities to go pro. But what he actually does is he takes one sponsorship. He does a toothpaste commercial, and then he retires from athletics. And he uses that money from his toothpaste commercial to put himself through med school. And today he is a practicing orthopedic surgeon. And he does sometimes work with Team USA. And last, but certainly not least, is the historical moment that Lake Placid is probably the most well known for, the Miracle on Ice. And I'll overview it just in case anyone doesn't know a whole lot about it. The Miracle on Ice refers to the moment when a team of extreme underdog American hockey players beat the heavily favored Soviet Union in a medal round match at the 1980 Men's Olympic Hockey Tournament. So it's a lot. To get really kind of an idea of what this game and these Olympics mean, we really have to put it in context. So in 1980, we are seeing this continuation of the intense political rivalry between the US and the USSR known as the Cold War. There is no actual fighting, but there are like proxy wars being fought just a few months before these Olympics. The USSR invaded Afghanistan, there's kind of just generally this cultural competition of capitalism versus communism. Here on the left, this is a Time magazine cover from January 1980, just 1 month before the Olympics are happening. So it can looking at it, you can get kind of an idea of how people were feeling. Um, Also, at this time within the US, there's an oil crisis going on, gas prices are sky high, and just generally morale amongst Americans is low. It's really not the most patriotic time in history. All right, we're gonna rewind really quickly and remember our old pal Pierre. By the time 1980 rolls around, he is sadly dead, but we're gonna consider his spirit for a moment. He wants to the Olympics to build a better world through gentlemen's sport. And in the context of this game, it means that NHL players are not allowed to join the Olympics in 1980 because they are professionals. They're being paid to play hockey. So Team USA actually creates the youngest Olympic hockey team in history from a group of college hockey players because they're eligible to compete in the Olympics. They're amateurs. The average age on this team, this is all of them here, the average age on this team is around 21 years old. And let's compare this to the Soviets. They are not technically professionals. Their professional jobs that they are officially paid to do is to be a part of the Red Army Club, which is a branch of the Soviet military. So they're officially soldiers. It just so happens that in their free time, they play hockey, and their role in the Soviet military is to represent their nation on an international stage through sport. This is the Soviet team. The average age on this team is around 27 years old. And the USSR has dominated the Olympic hockey tournament for the last quarter of a century. They are the gold medal favorites. They've won 5 out of the 6 previous Olympics. Nobody even is expecting Team USA to get past the first round. But against all odds, Team USA wins match after match. They advance to the medal round of the tournament, and finally, they face off with Team USSR. From an athletic standpoint, there's a lot of tension. There's this very amateur team who somehow made it pretty far into the Olympic tournament. And then there's this athletic powerhouse that everyone is expecting to win. But there's also a very political lens that a lot of people are viewing this game through. When interviewed after the Olympics, American players have said that this game for them was like not about politics, like they weren't even thinking about it. But to viewers, they were very definitely aware of the Cold War tensions on the ice. So it's not just Team USA versus Team USSR. It is capitalism versus communism. It's David versus Goliath. So in a game dubbed the Miracle on Ice and often referred to as one of the greatest upsets in sports history, the underdog American team beats the internationally ranked Soviets. They then go on to win their final match, and this results in the American team taking home the gold in hockey for the first time in decades. This is a major moment in hockey history, and honestly, a major moment across America, because it signifies a lot outside of just sports. Feelings about the game were colored by political tensions, and it's often really remembered as a much needed win for the American people in the midst of what was a tough time for the nation. This is actually my favorite photograph in our collection. It depicts Main Street in Lake Placid just after Team USA won. The museum building is actually like just behind this picture. So this is right out front. All these people are in the street. There's a lot of joy in this photograph, and I think it's awesome how something as simple as a hockey game can bring together so many different people. There are individuals across the entire nation from entirely different backgrounds who were united on this one thing, at least for one night. People really came together, and I think that's so incredible, and it really revives some patriotism that Americans have in their country. However, to be fair, I do want to think about both sides of this. So on the one hand, this looks like a pretty epic party. I'd love to jump into this photograph and be a part of it. Looks like a blast. But also part of where a lot of this excitement and joy is coming from is this sentiment of like, yeah, we beat the Russians. So when I say people are viewing this lens also through the lens or viewing this game kind of through the lens of like political tensions, here's an example. This is an image from the crowds at the 1980 hockey game at the Miracle on Ice. There's a group of Americans holding up these signs here. So there is a little bit part of the legacy of this game that can be super patriotic in a way that's like kind of a put down against the Russians. And I don't think this is unique to this game, and I definitely don't think it was everybody. But I don't think that there was ubiquitous good sportsmanship. Um, because we want to recall what our old friend Pierre said about sports. They can be used to strengthen peace or to prepare for war. So we're going to think about how we can do that. In the winter of 1980, we're going to shift gears just a little bit. There's a 12-year-old named Mark Carter who lives in Dannemora. Dannemora is a town like an hour north of Lake Placid. So we're still in this region nearby where the Olympics are happening. And Mark, he's 12 years old. He loves hockey. It's super cool that the Olympics are happening so close by. It's so cool that some of the best hockey players in the world are gathering here. Really, no matter how you slice it, like there's absolutely no doubt that the Soviet men's ice hockey team was this group of incredibly talented players. Anyway, this kid is in the back of the car with his siblings and his mom, and they're running errands in February. And eventually, they come up behind this bus in the road, and he begs his mom to follow the bus just in case there's Olympians inside. And she's like, "Okay, all right, we can follow the bus." And then the bus pulls over, and he's like, "We got to pull over too." Just in case there's Olympians inside. And people, sure enough, they start getting out. And it is none other than the Soviet men's hockey team that gets off that bus. So pictured here is Mark and his siblings. They don't speak Russian, and the players don't speak like super fluent English, but they do manage to communicate. And the Russian team ends up taking the time to take pictures and sign autographs for this family. And well, the Miracle on Ice goes down in history as this amazing hockey moment with this kind of nationalistic sense of pride. I think this moment here is also something that's worth remembering. This is also what the Olympics are about. Because this is awesome. In this interaction, these like top caliber adult athletes, they connected with a group of children who really like their sport. They're from opposite sides of the world, part of different cultures, don't speak the same language, but at the end of the day, we are all people and we can all always find something in common. Okay, I ran through a lot, so I will just check the chat super quickly. All right, let's see. When was women's figure skating allowed? Great question. So, for the longest time, actually, women's figure skating was the only sport that women could compete in at the Winter Olympics. So that's been a way that women compete in the Olympic Games since the beginning. So since 1924, were gold, silver, and bronze medals invented for the Olympics. Um, I don't actually know the whole origin story behind gold, silver, and bronze, but I do know in the ancient Olympic Games, you won a like laurel crown for your efforts, and there was only first place. So you won a nice hat made out of branches, and that was all. There was no second and third place. So that is something that comes in just for the um, modern Olympics. And then the other thing is that in the modern Olympics since 1896, every Olympian gets to take home a medal. So there are participation medals, and they don't just go to athletes; they also go to like coaches, trainers, really anyone who's involved in participating. Um, is the torch carried the entire way? Yes and no. Um, so the torch, it's the same flame. The flame never goes out from Olympia, Greece to the host city. So along that whole journey, it is the same unbroken flame being passed from person to person. And they will usually carry it because it's running and walking with it is easiest. But they'll also do some other things with it. Sometimes they have to carry it across an ocean. So like in 1980, instead of having someone hold the torch on an airplane, they put the flame into like an enclosed miner's lamp, and that was how they carried it across the ocean. So no one really had it in their hand there. So it's the same flame, but it's not always someone holding a torch. They'll do different things with it. Is the torch relay all on foot? It is not all on foot. We'll talk about some different examples of things they do with it, but there's been dog sledding, gondolas, all kinds of different things. Why isn't the 1960 U.S. hockey team, who also beat the heavily favored Soviets, more celebrated? Good question. I think that it's hard to answer that. I don't know for sure. It's kind of a subjective question, but in my opinion, I think that there is just a lot more going on in the world that like I said, there were a lot of like cultural and political contextual factors that really played into this game. Also, the Soviets in 1960 hadn't quite established themselves as the like total dominating hockey powerhouse that they didn't have that same reputation in 1960 that they did in 1980. I mean they're good at hockey, but it wasn't to the extent like they didn't have the last several decades of domination with hockey to back them up. So I think a little bit of reputation and also just like what was going on in the world at the time. Also, like the American team, like that was the youngest Olympic hockey team that had ever existed. So they were really, really underdogs. In a way that I think maybe the 1960 US hockey team wasn't recognized to be quite as much. But that's what I think. All right, I will go on. So the Olympics, they happened in Lake Placid 46 years ago. And since then, some things have happened. From 1980 to today, the Winter Olympics, they have evolved along with us. So what we see in this picture here, this is actually from 1980, Lake Placid, we become the first Olympic venue to use artificial snowmaking. Today, it is a requirement of any city who is nominating themselves to host the Olympics. Because as climate change generally warms winters around the world, refrigeration and snowmaking technologies, they help to keep these winter sport traditions alive. In 1980, I also mentioned that the rule was that all athletes had to be amateurs, and I remember someone asking me about this. So the rule is different today. So this changes in 1994 with the Lillehammer Olympic Winter Games. So as of 1994, professionals are allowed to compete in the Olympics. Also, as of 1994, the Summer and Winter Games are staggered by 2 years. So the Summer Olympics, they happened in 2024, and the Winter Olympics are happening in 2026. So that's staggering. That starts between 1992 and 1994 for the Winter Games. And this is an image of the opening ceremony from the 1994 Olympics. So for everyone who was wondering, do they run with the torch the whole way? No, they do not. So this is the final leg of the 1994 torch relay. It actually gets ski jumped into the middle of the opening ceremony. So this guy, he just goes flying in with a lit torch. And that video is actually on YouTube if you want to look it up. It's pretty neat. But this is also kind of following a trend of nations getting more and more creative with their torch relays. So, as the birthplace of skiing, Norway likes to celebrate their history by incorporating skiing into their relays. So, they do both ski jumping and cross country skiing. In 2002, once again, here is the 2002 Olympic torch. The Winter Olympics returned to American soil. The relay begins, as always, in Olympia, Greece, but then it journeys all across the country. You can see this whole fun line here, and it visits every American city that has ever hosted the Olympics, including Lake Placid. So it does come visit us up here. And they choose the final torchbearers in this relay to be the members of the U.S. men's 1980 hockey team. So there's this like neat little reunion of that team who made history in Lake Placid, connecting to the ongoing Olympics in Salt Lake City. And the Olympics are actually coming back to Salt Lake City in 2034. And then in 2014, this is my personal favorite thing with the torch relay. At the Sochi, Russia Olympics, one stop on the torch relay is the International Space Station. So this is what the torch looks like right here. And these are some astronauts holding it. This showcases two things. One, how technology and fun stuff, they're starting to get more and more involved in hosting the games. And two, I think it's neat because the mission of the International Space Station and the Olympics, I think have a like when you really boil it down, like they have some things in common, because both the Olympics and the International Space Station, they represent a coming together of peoples from nations around the world to work on some sort of common goal. The ISS, it's about like they're doing research up there. And with the Olympics, it's about athletics, obviously. But I think they're both super cool. For anyone who's got a really keen eye, you might notice the torch is not on fire in space. So what they did is that this was kind of a branch off the relay. So they sent a torch up to the International Space Station, but they also at the same time had a lit torch down on Earth. So as the torch was getting handed around the astronauts from the different countries in space, down on Earth, the torch was on fire and it was going around traveling. So it didn't go out. And then finally, we land in today in 2026. Throughout the last 46 years, Lake Placid's Olympic venues have not sat unused. They've actually been continuously updated, and we have continued to host international championships and events on World Cup circuits. So this means that we have state-of-the-art technology, and we actually kind of have a fun little connection to the games going on in Italy right now. Because yes, Lake Placid and Italy, we both hold the shared distinction of being one of only four places to host the Winter Olympics twice, which is awesome. But when work on the sliding track for bobsled, skeleton, and luge sports fell behind, Lake Placid was chosen as the official Plan B site for sliding sports for the 2026 Olympic Winter Games. So obviously that plan didn't end up getting activated, but it kind of really shows that we are still part of the international athletic competition here in Lake Placid, and our small town still gets to make these amazing cultural connections because of it. Like I said earlier tonight, there's only 2,000 year-round residents here, so it's pretty small, and we are pretty rural. And I think the fact that we get to interact with so many people from around the world is really unique for a place like this. And I think it's super cool that the Olympics have enabled that to happen here. Uh, right. So Cortina and Placid, Lake Placid, we both serve as two-time Olympic host cities. We both carry a unique legacy and are places for the world to unite. However, as Pierre de Coubertin knew, and as we've seen play out throughout history, the Olympic Games can be used to strengthen for peace or to prepare for war. So this is what the 2026 Olympic torch looks like, and this was part of the flame lighting ceremony in Olympia, Greece. And at the 2026 Olympic flame lighting ceremony, current International Olympic Committee President Kirsty Coventry, who's also the first woman and the first African to hold that office, she commented that these games in 2026, they're happening at a critical point in our global history. She said, as we light the Olympic flame for Milano Cortina, we will carry this light from the past to the present and into the future. And it's a shared future we all want to see. This is why we firmly believe in the Olympic truce, in laying down our differences and wanting to hope for a better future. The Olympic Games are about competition, athletic excellence, and inspiring stories of underdog successes. But they are, above all else, a chance for the world to unite, and they give us all common ground to stand on. So I'll open it up more now. I'll check the Q&A. If anyone has any questions about the Olympics or Lake Placid or our museum, feel free to drop it in the chat. I will also share if anyone has a question that you think of later. This is how you can reach us. This is our website and our email. If anyone wants to come visit, this is our address. You're welcome to trek on over here. But thank you all so much for coming and learning more about the story of the Olympic Winter Games.
Brady, thank you so much. This was amazing. And I'm unfortunately my biggest takeaway from tonight's presentation is nothing to do with the Olympics. It's that the Great Depression was famously depressing, which I laughed out loud alone in my office. That was the greatest joke I've ever heard in my life. Thank you again so much. What a full, wonderful presentation. You still have a bunch of questions in the Q&A. Did you answer what did I miss? Because I was trying to dismiss them as you went. When was women's figure skating allowed?
Oh yeah, I can go back over it. So women's figure skating has been part of the Winter Olympics since the Winter Olympics started in 1924. So that was like one of the only things that women have been able to compete in from the beginning. Yeah,
You answered this. I absolutely lost track of keeping up on these.
totally fine.
You did that one. It's church relay all on foot. You did that one. Why isn't that? Did you talk about the 1960s U.S. hockey team who also beat the heavily favored Soviets? Yes, you did.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, peek behind the curtain. Chris was also doing a registration report for the partner libraries while this program was going. Excellent presentation. I'd love to visit. Amazing. If someone were to want to visit your, I'm going to turn this into a question, Brady. If someone were to visit your wonderful museum, what's the best time of year to visit you?
Oh, kind of depends on what else you want to do here. In the summer, I mean, this is an awesome museum, but it's not going to occupy you for a week. So in the summertime, we have really like July and August. Well, we have a joke that in Lake Placid there's two seasons, winter and August. So if you come in August, it's really fun if you like hiking or paddling, any kinds of like fun like fishing, fun outdoor sports. And if you are a fan of winter, like January and February, if you like to ski or snowshoe, we or even like if you like to skate, Mirror Lake is so we have a lake that's like centered around our downtown and it freezes every year. So like in basically through downtown you can do dog sled rides. There's a toboggan run that shoots you out onto the lake. So there's a lot of really fun stuff to do in winter. So I would say like January or February in the thick of winter or like July and August in the thick of summer. Just don't come in April. Everything is closed.
Amazing. Everything is closed in April. Good to know.
Yep.
You were getting just flooded with compliments in both the chat and there's one here in the Q&A. Someone in the chat is asking, is there a virtual tour of the Lake Placid Museum on your website? And I'm going to jump off of that question and add a little bit. Are there other virtual programs that you guys do that people could join by looking at your website?
Not exactly, no. So we don't have a virtual tour of the museum. But we do virtual programs like this. Or if you are affiliated with like a school or something, we do virtual field trips that are on like specific topics, that are like free to use that we can share with you. But unfortunately, we don't have a virtual tour of the museum itself. That'd be super cool though.
Uh, what about the Munich games?
What about the Munich Games? The Munich Games in 1972. They I don't know, just some fun facts about the Munich Games. That was the first time we had an Olympic mascot, and the Munich Games there was actually in the Olympic Village. There was a terrorist attack, and so in 1980, how I mentioned the Olympic Village, was built to be converted into a prison. That was part of why they did that because they were like, well, if it's being built to eventually be converted into a prison, then that means the Olympic Village is going to have really great security and we will not have a repeat of 1972. So I don't know what you're going to, if that answers it, but that's a connection from the Munich Games.
One of our patrons also just said that their cousin won a gold medal for javelin in those Olympics.
Oh, sweet.
Also, that was impressive that I just went, Munich Games? You went, yeah, this year? Historians blow my mind with the way their brains can wrap with dates. Still fuzzy on the relay. Did they walk it around the country or I'm assuming that means drive it. I think they missed letter D.
Yeah, that's a good question. They do a bunch of different stuff. Like there's really no rules for what you have to do. In 2002, they mostly ran around the country with it. It was around it was just over 12,000 miles. So it was a lot of teamwork, of passing it around and running it. But they'll send it to the International Space Station. They'll ski with it. They'll have underwater robots. Sometimes they will drive it. They'll take it on horseback. They get creative.
Amazing. Um, why is everything closed in April?
Why is everything closed in April? So April is when all of our snow starts to melt, and with all of the melting snow, it basically causes a lot of the ecosystems here to get super fragile. And so the snow is all half melted, so it stinks for skiing. But there is still a bunch of snow and everything is wet and super saturated, and also the ecosystems are getting really fragile, so you can't actually hike on it. So there's like nothing to do. And like the schools let out for like 2 weeks in April. Like most of the businesses here are family-run businesses, so this is just when everyone takes their vacation. Just it's terrible weather. That's why. And everything you do in Lake Placid is like a fun outside thing. So if it's
Gotcha.
terrible weather, you don't want to be here. Yeah.
Has snowshoe racing ever been done in the Olympics?
Not in the Olympics, but there are a bunch of different things that have been done as what's called demonstration sports. So demonstration sports, we don't do them anymore. They got phased out in the 90s. But it was basically kind of like a country could choose to do some sports like just for fun. So one of the things that Lake Placid did as a demonstration sport in 1932 was dog sledding. And actually women's sports were demonstration sports for a while, so like women's speed skating. So they had athletes from around the world who were women, who were speed skaters, who were competing. But because they were in a demonstration sport and not an official Olympic sport, they didn't win medals and they didn't really go down in history as Olympians. So snowshoe racing, or like ski joring or niche little sports like that. Sometimes countries have done them as demonstration sports, but not as actual Olympic sports.
Sorry, there's a question I actually want us to end on, but this one made me laugh. What is the deal with curling?
What is the deal with curling? It is the more you get it, the more you get into it, it gets more interesting. It is also called chess on ice. It is super, super strategic. And you have to figure out where you want your stones to land, how to knock the opponents out of the way. I recommend honestly just doing like a 20-minute Google of what the terms mean in curling because you can actually like as you're watching it, you can start to understand what it means that they're yelling at each other.
Hmm.
Um, because it gets loud in there. But I think curling is really fun, but you have to kind of know how it works in order to appreciate it.
I do know there is a Chicago curling club. So if anyone wants to get more information, you can actually probably reach out to them to learn a little bit more about it. I know they did, I can't remember the library. This is so unuseful of me, but I know one of the libraries in the area did the club is in Northbrook. I'm not sure if Northbrook's the library that did this presentation, but there was a library in the area that hosts them for a presentation. So I know they are more than happy to share and help educate people. So if you're interested in learning more about curling, maybe seeing some more hands-on stuff, you might be able to check out this Northbrook Curling Club. Um, and then the question I would love to end on, we're right at time, and I want to thank you again, Righty. I know it's later where you are, correct?
Yeah, it's
By a little
9
bit.
p.m.
So thank you so much. I want to get you on your way because it's late where you are. Um, and but this is, I think it's a great question, especially because I know we have some people on this call who aren't from my library, so they haven't done this series with us before necessarily. Are there other Olympic museums? And if there are, how is it decided who's going to get an artifact?
Oh, that is a great question. So, we are a part of the Olympic Museum Network, which is an official thing that is kind of like monitored by the International Olympic Committee. And there's about 30 Olympic museums worldwide. There are some museums that are have some content that has to do with the Olympics, like for example, the Alf Egan Ski Museum in Park City, Utah, or like right by Salt Lake City, where they hosted the games in 2002. So they're not part of the Olympic Museum network, but they would like to be. Um, and so you have to kind of just meet some qualifications and like apply. And so there's about 30 of us worldwide. And so how they decide who gets an artifact, the International Olympic Committee and the Olympic Museum Network doesn't have like full control over who gets what. So a lot of our artifacts came from donations. So like local people and athletes, like a lot of our medals, for example, we have local athletes who won these medals who donated them to the museum, or same thing with like uniforms. However, a lot of our torches came from, so we have 18 different torches in our collection right now. And a lot of them came from private collectors. The International Olympic Committee doesn't like fully monitor the especially like the older torches. However, for the games going on right now, we did this for 2024 too. If you're in the Olympic Museum Network, you can just email the International Olympic Committee and basically say like, can you please send me a torch when your games are over? We would love to have one. Thank you so much. And they will work with you because there's not one singular torch. And there's like a lot of examples that I could use for this. There's a lot of things in the Olympics that I don't know where it kind of comes from, but a lot of people think like, oh, there's only one of these, and the torch is one of them. They make anywhere from a few to a few thousand. So there's only 30 Olympic museums worldwide. Usually, if everyone wants a torch, the International Olympic Committee can make sure everyone gets a torch. Yeah. So there's a lot of
Wonderful.
things like that where there's just more than one.
I will also say, as someone who used to work in a museum, I worked as a part of like a historic home slash there was also a military museum, and
Cool.
the military museums are not in a major like we aren't some big sharing thing, but when a museum is deaccessioning or things no longer share the story, ethically we have to
Yeah.
give them to other museums. So if another museum that wasn't part of this consortium or maybe wasn't telling an Olympic like the Olympic story, but maybe they had a gold medal because of something in their collection, they would likely reach out to a museum like Bridie's and donate it. So, for example, I worked at the First Division Museum at Cantigny Park. We were deaccessioning some of our active military vehicles. We had a World War II tank. It went to the National World War II Museum down in Texas. So artifacts find their way around to other locations as well as need be.
Yeah,
For those
absolutely.
not wondering. Well, anyway, Bridie, thank you so much for what a wonderful presentation. It was great to spend the evening with you, learn a little bit more about the Olympics as the Olympics are going on. And I'm going to shamelessly plug to all of these museums, or not museums, libraries that have joined us this evening. If you enjoyed tonight's program, fun fact, you don't have to be a Schaumburg Library card holder to go to our virtual events. You are more than welcome to go to the rest of Night with the Museum. We do it once a month. It's the third Tuesday of the month. Our next museum is going to be on Tuesday, March 17th from 7 to 8 p.m. We're bringing back, we had them last year and they were so great. We're bringing back the National First Ladies Museum as a way to continue celebrating America 250. They're going to be talking about some of the first ladies in history who broke the glass ceiling and really broke some barriers and made some changes. So definitely come out and join us for that. Registration for that is live now at schaumburglibrary.org/events. So we hope to see some of our new friends there, and of course, some of our familiar friends who have been part of the Night with the Museum series this entire time. Hope to see you there as well. Again, Bridie, you have a Bridie, you have a great rest of your evening, and everyone, you have a great